All right, everybody. Today is our first lesson for part 3 of Unit 1, and the topic is factors and multiples. So you will need your multiplication chart, and you can also use your factor chart, which is what we handed out to you the other day. Okay, so to start, we're going to talk about prime numbers and composite numbers. A prime number is a number with only two factors, one and itself. So an example of a prime number would be 7, because the only two numbers you can multiply to get to 7 are 1 and 7. Another example is 2. 1 times 2 is the only two numbers you can multiply to get to 2. 13 and 29. If you look at your factor chart, you can see which numbers are prime because we labeled them for you. So another example would be 19 or 37. Okay? Composite numbers are any of those other numbers that are not prime. So these are numbers with 3 or more factors. So an example would be 10, because I can do 1 times 10 or 2 times 5. That's 4 different factors. 20, 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5. 4. Another example would be 56. So you can see on the chart here, obviously the composite numbers are not labeled prime, and they're numbers like 22 that have 1, 2, 3, 4 factors, anything higher than 3. Okay? 3 or higher, I should say. Okay, so to review, this is probably something you've learned before, but a factor is factors are two or more numbers that multiply to form a product. Okay, the result of a multiplication problem is what a product is, your answer. So an example would be that if we were looking for all the factors of 6, we could say 2 and 3 are factors of 6, and 1 and 6 are factors of 6, because 2 times 3 equals 6, and 1 times 6 equals 6. So all of the factors of 6 would be 2, 3, 1, and 6. You can see on your factor chart that we have those listed, 1, 2, 3, and 6. They're listed kind of as pairs on top of each other. 1 times 6 equals 6, and 2 times 3 equals 6. Okay? So if we were to list all of the factors of 24, again, we're thinking of those pairs that multiply together to give us the product or answer of 24. So you might know these off the top of your head, or you can check your factor chart. So you would find 24 on your factor chart right here and list all the factors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, 24. If we're asking you to list factors, the order doesn't really matter, but it's best to try to put them in numerical order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, 24. So you may have seen in elementary school, if you ever talked about factors, this little rainbow to show that the pairs are 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. Those are the numbers you multiply together to get the result of 24. All the factors of 16, again, you might know them off the top of your head, but if not, you can check your factor chart. You can find, trying to fit this in here. You can find 16, and we have, it's blurry, 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. So I'm going to list those out. 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. It's also really important to put commas between your factors so they don't all smush together and it doesn't look like 12 or 48 or that 1 and 6 are separate. So make sure you're putting commas in between all of your factors. Okay, last one is 36. Again, you can check your factor chart. 36 has a lot of factors. 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and then this 6 is standing there on its own, That's because 6 times 6 equals 36, and I'm not going to list 6 twice. I'm only going to list 6 once. So if you see this on your factor chart and a number doesn't have a number below it or above it, that means you're multiplying this number by itself. Okay, so I'm going to list those out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, 12, 18, 36. Okay? So again, factors are two numbers that multiply together to form a product. Now we're going to move on to multiples. Okay, so multiples are the product of a number and any other number. Okay, so you are going to be using your multiplication chart to help you with multiples. So think of it that way, multiples, multiplication chart. Okay, so an example would be that 15 is a multiple of 3 because 5 times 3 equals 15. 4 is a multiple of 4 because 1 times 4 equals 4. Okay, so when you are looking for multiples, you would just look at your multiplication chart and find the numbers either going down vertically or going across horizontally. So all the multiples of 6, for example, would be right here. 6, 12, 18, 24, or you can look down this way. 6, 12, 18, 24, and so on. There are an infinite number of multiples for each number because I can do 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times a million, 6 times 2 billion. So there's an infinite number of multiples. Usually when you're asked to find multiples, we'll ask you to list the first 3 or the first 5, okay? So if we were to list the first 3 multiples of 6, like I just showed you on the multiplication chart, they would be 6 because 6 times 1 is 6, 12 because 6 times 2 is 12, and 18 because 6 times 3 is 18. Okay? The first 3 multiples of 8, again, you might know them off the top of your head, or you can look at your multiplication chart up at 8 here. 8, 16, and 24 would be the first 3 multiples of 8 because 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, and 8 times 3 is 24. Okay, 17. The first 3 multiples would be 17, 34, and 51. Okay, so just one last reminder, factors, you multiply the 2 numbers together to get a product. So the factors are all the numbers that pair up together to multiply to get the product. Multiples are the product of any number and another number. So multiples, you're using your multiplication chart. Factors, you use your factor chart.